better hide yo hard. We're hearing a lot of that yo today. Dr. Eli Karam's in the studio. Maybe you saw him on TV. He's on WBKI on Mondays, too. Good to see you, Dr. Eli.
Good to see you, Terry. Beginning of the week instead of the end, but, you know.
That's a little different twist for us.
Yeah, different day. People still have problems, so we're here.
Right, you are. You're at U of L's Kent School of Social Work and president-elect of the Kentucky Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. And so we're glad to have you on board. So we're hearing all these political commercials right now. Let's just start right there.
That's right.
How does, in a relationship, let's use politicians as our example, but you could use it in many other ways. When one person has a lot of prominence and the other person just gets sick of everybody, telling them, hey, you're doing this, or they're kind of in their own world. I mean, you see these politicians all the time, like they're Nancy Pelosi. We just heard them somewhere. There's a Mr. Pelosi who just stays in the sort of quiet, and then we see, obviously, over the years, we've seen all these political wives who just sort of stay in the quiet. How does a marriage deal with someone who has a whole lot of light thrown on them, and the other person that's not their thing?
Right, and I think it depends on when that prominence came. If it was a couple that kind of came together in the public eye, is different than when, fame or the public eye is thrust onto somebody. But I think you have to have a supportive nature, and especially in these political spouses. I mean, you have to put on a unified front. So no matter what happens behind closed doors, you see these political spouses being very, very supportive of their spouse. It's only after they fall from prominence, like a Edwards or even Al Gore later on, do their spouses leave them. I mean, think about that. Tipper and Al were married for 30 years, and then she finally leaves him.
So let's step out away from politics and get into the real world now.
Sure.
Somebody, he or she, their career blossoms after they get married, and so their position or whatever, let's say they just get more power at work or whatever, changes. How do you keep your marriage safe when someone else is kind of on a fast track and lots of great things are happening and woohoo, awards and raises, and the other person sort of feels like, well, I'm just kind of on a slower climb?
It's a trade-off, and we don't define equity by how much money somebody brings into the relationship, because if we did that, almost no long-term relationship or marriage would be equal, Terry. So someone always makes more money, someone always has more of the spotlight thrust on them. So if you're in a relationship, can your partner support you, and is what you're bringing into the relationship, even if it's not as much money, is it viewed as an important contribution by your partner? I think in a lot of these relationships and that I'm working with now, we'll see sometimes the woman is making more money than the man. And the man, if they have traditional gender roles, and if they define themselves through their career and either they're out of work or have had to take a cut in salary, that kind of gets to them. It's not socially acceptable not to support your partner's career, but a lot of people build resentments when they feel like their partner is taking the spotlight, either financially or career-wise.
And now that we've been going through this recession, and hopefully we're easing out of it now, but a lot of people have lost their careers. So whoever was building up a great career, let's say, may have just been stymied by the recession, and then their life goes into a funk. Or a politician who loses. They lose their race, and then the day after the election is like... So how in a relationship do you protect yourselves against somebody's funk becoming an odious presence in your relationship?
You're right, and I think that's the other scenario. Say you've invested so much in one person's career, and the other spouse has stayed home or taking care of the kids, and then with this economic downturn, the one person who had been the provider is out of work. Then the other person has to go to work. An example, I'm working with a couple, and the woman has been a great mother, and she's defined that as her role. Husband got downsized. She's had to go back to work and has not really wanted to do it, but she's done it because they've had to. So there is kind of resentments there, and the husband doesn't feel that good about himself either. So he has this underneath their surface anger. We see with couples, anger is really a smokescreen emotion, Terry. It's not really a primary emotion. There's always something under there, whether there be feelings of inadequacy, failure, or guilt underneath that. So in this situation, the wife is resentful that she has to go back to work, and the husband is feeling inadequate that she has to. And it creates this divide.
Yeah, that would be a double-edged sword there to deal with, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But being supportive is critically important. I mean, I was having this conversation with a couple not long ago about some other people in their family, and they were talking about they'd both lost their jobs. That's what it was. and they were just sort of, oh, well, we'll get around to it, and they were just sort of lollygagging for a long time without really wanting to get back into things. That would be an oddity, for that to happen to two people. But when one loses a job and the other one keeps going to work, and I would guess there's a lot of resentment from the person who's going to work just to say, what are you doing all day?
Right.
Well, I'm trying.
Right.
Honey, I'm trying. Really, I'm trying.
Well, I think I see that argument a lot where maybe somebody has the job so they can kind of quantify and qualify every hour, but just because someone is staying at home in between careers or taking care of children, they're working just as hard. I mean, you can call my wife up and ask her right now. I would not want to trade positions with her, and she in the same way wouldn't want to trade with me. So I think that does, unless you're talking about it, how you, again, quantify equity in the relationship and what you're bringing to the table. And just because you're not working, or you're switching careers doesn't mean you're not putting in valuable stuff to make the relationship work.
But still, if she continues working and he's lost his job and he's staying home playing Xbox all day,
right?
I mean, you got to bring that to a head.
Right?
Is it just? Do you do it gently? How do you do it? You leave a note? What do you say?
Right, and those are the situations, too, where maybe it's not a traditional gender roles, and the woman is providing the most, if not all the income.
You don't want to stomp on the other person's feelings, is my point. So how do you bring it up? Honey, it's been a month, it's been 2, whatever.
Right, it's time to get back out there, and I think you have to do it in a gingerly way, but you also have to have this expectation that just because I have this job, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking for work. So I think how you do it is important. To let your partner kind of get over the blow from the last job and give them what we call the stroke, enough of the support, but also the kick. Come on, you got to get back out there. I know you can do it. And a lot of these men and women, once they've lost a job or downsized in this economy, maybe for the first time, they have started to doubt their confidence, which is scary when you've identified as your role of a provider for so long, and now the one thing you took pride in and were confident in, maybe more so than being a spouse, maybe more so than being a parent, now you've kind of lost confidence in that, and you've put all your eggs in one basket, and you got to rebuild, and it's a common scenario. So you can see how it has an effect on the individual, but also a ripple effect on the relationship.
But if you were properly triangulated, let's say that you did have a lot of appreciation for what you did for a living, but also for being a spouse and being a parent, and then one of those components is taken away, the job, gone, and then it's also important to check and make sure you don't become overly obsessive as the spouse or the parent, too, right?
And you got it right. I mean, when I'm dealing with people and I see a healthy relationship, it's usually because they're in balance, meaning they have, proper parts put in work, family, and then the couple part. When you get out of balance and you overemphasize any one part, you're not good for you or for your partner. Like I say many times, if all your soul happiness rises and falls with that one person, Terry, that's too much responsibility for that one person to carry. And then you feel that resentful and that need coming in.
Dr. Eli Karam's in the studio, marriage and family therapist. We're going to do another segment in a few minutes because there was a story that came out today about one of the Chilean miners. You heard the story that he has a mistress.
He has two, doesn't he?
Exactly. That was the story today. There's another one on there today, so we're going to dabble into that territory of infidelity in a few. And 2 other words to throw out there to you, Eli. You can start thinking on this now. Brett Favre. The old sexting. I have a clip from P. Diddy explaining sexting coming up, too, with Dr. Eli in a few here on 84 WHAS.
This Kentucky Pound
on it.
All right, NFL talk with Will Wolford in a couple of minutes here on 84 WHAS. Dr. Eli Karam, kind enough to hang around here. Dr. Eli Karam is at the University of Louisville's Kent School of Social Work. And his website is elikaram.com, K-A-R-A-M. So, Eli, earlier in the show, we were talking about the Chilean miners. And what a miracle that was, that story.
Can you imagine what those guys down there were talking about for 2 months? I mean, we talk about guys, sometimes the stereotype of being emotionally unintelligent terriers, talking about sports or guy stuff. Can you imagine what they learned about each other in that 2 months down there? I bet that miner told a lot about his mistresses.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So they supposedly made a blood pact. They weren't going to talk unless en masse. And now a few of them are actually talking individually, and one's saying, yeah, if you give me 25 grand, I'll talk.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess people, the human brain and heart, they become interwoven here when there's a group trauma like this, some sort of disaster, and this one man taking charge, the guy in charge there who said we're going to ration the food or whatever, he saved their lives.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it could have been, it could have been an anarchy, and they would have eaten all the provisions in a day or two, and then...
It is an amazing story, and the stuff that movies are about. But you wonder the lasting effect for those guys is they had this shared experience, and they go back out to the real world, and they return to their families and their homes. And if you're like this one Chilean miner, what was his name, who's dealing with now...
Yanni Barrios.
Yeah, probably a very private man now dealing with his relationship in a very public way with multiple women.
Yes, and apparently, for those of you unaware, the Chilean miner with the mistress, apparently there's another mistress now who's younger. Now, the one mistress is 52. He's 50. She's 52.
An older woman.
So they're comparable ages. But the new mistress is 25. Oh, my goodness! But we don't know if it's valid or not. Anyway, it's all over the news today. So, dealing for people in our real world here, dealing with the issue of infidelity obviously goes on all the time. What do you tell couples when they come in there and they're bleeding from their hearts over someone's indiscretion?
Right.
How do you help them?
Now, how do you help them? Well, first is, do you want to save the relationship or not? For some people, no matter how many years they have together, you cheat on me, whether it be emotional or physical, it's over. So the first question is, do you want to save the relationship? If so, then all contact with that other person or other people, if it's multiple infidelities, has to stop. So our minor friend would, if he was going to save his marriage, would have to cut off everything with his mistresses. And that's very difficult for some people, not just men, women too, that are involved in these like split selves affairs, Terry, meaning they've really formed romantic relationships. They've compartmentalized their lives so that they might love their family and their kids, but they're also really attached to this other people. And those are the hardest type of affairs to end and recover from because you're really emotionally and physically invested in another person.
A lovely parting gift? No, probably not. You said cut off all contact right away.
Cut off all contact and do whatever it has. And guys and women out there, you just, if you're getting into a slippery slope, if you're doing things or getting attention from people and you don't want if something you think your partner wouldn't want or wouldn't approve of, or you don't feel comfortable telling your partner, it's probably a good sign that you shouldn't be doing that. So transparency, openness is always the best policy, and certainly when you're recovering from an infidelity, you got to be transparent. Whatever your partner needs, whether it be showing them your phone records, giving them your passwords, you need to be transparent to rebuild that trust.
Does that help, though, when the other person becomes your parole officer?
Right. Well, it doesn't, certainly you can't imagine long-term being policed at every turn and being checked up on and micromanaged. But in the initial phase to recover, to show that you have nothing to hide when you're rebuilding that trust, it's necessary for a lot of couples that I work with.
A whole lot of that information has been shared between Mr. and Mrs. Favre of late, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and that's another thing, guys out there. Don't, your digital footprint, as they say, don't post anything, take anything. How about that Metro officer also that was sending inappropriate...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. People, even smart people or people that should know better do really stupid things when they get a little bit of attention from the opposite sex. So you have to be very careful. Do not transmit anything. And again, don't do anything you wouldn't want your partner finding out about.
Later in the show, I want to play a clip from P. Diddy on Letterman's show describing sexting in a rather amusing way. Last thing for here, I'll just take it right off the front page of the Courier-Journal today. It's a quote from Jack Conway in the debate last night. Quote, and I'm asking you, Dr. Eli, when is it ever a good idea to tie up a woman?
I don't know about that one, Terry.
We'll just leave it at that until next time.
I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Dr. Eli Karam, his website is elikaram.com, Karam. I thought I'd trick you with that one. Hillary liked it. Will Wolford next.